My name is Sharon, and by profession, I am an architect. However, on this significant day, I found myself taking on the role of a bride, eagerly making my way down the aisle. I had put my heart and soul into organizing every aspect of our wedding, from the choice of flowers to the playlist that would provide our soundtrack for the evening. I envisioned our special day as if it were lifted from the pages of a romance novel, a testament to the power of love. Standing at the altar was Peter, my soon-to-be husband who works as an engineer. His approach to life is pragmatic and direct, perfectly balancing my creative instincts. I always felt that we were a great match, enhancing each other's strengths. The excitement of beginning a new chapter with him filled me with joy. However, as our gazes met, I couldn't help but notice a distant, burdened look in his eyes. I attributed it to wedding day jitters. Little did I know, I was mistaken. As I walked closer, I overheard Peter's mother, Julie, whispering to someone next to her. Her scrutinizing look made me uneasy, but she managed a strained smile and told me I looked beautiful, though her eyes told a different story. The ceremony moved forward, and when it was time for Peter to speak his vows, there was a heart-stopping pause before he managed to say, "I do." His voice lacked the warmth I had come to associate with his affection for me. During the ring exchange, Julie made it a point to take a photo, loudly stating the importance of capturing the moment. Her words, though seemingly innocent, felt more like a veiled warning than a celebration of our commitment. At the reception, Julie found me mingling with some college friends and commented on my wedding dress with a thinly veiled critique, praising its beauty yet highlighting its non-traditional nature. I responded with a light-hearted remark about celebrating love in our unique way. Before the conversation could go further, Peter stepped in, asking his mother to give us space. For a moment, I thought he was defending our choices, but his comment hinted at resignation rather than support. His words felt out of place on a day that was meant to be filled with nothing but happiness. I scanned the crowd, hoping to lock eyes with someone who might confirm that what I was experiencing was just typical wedding day chaos. Yet deep inside, I knew better. There was a palpable tension, an undeniable sense that something fundamental was amiss, and the red flags were too prominent to overlook any longer. As Peter and I stepped onto the dance floor for our first dance, the distance between us was more than just physical. Our movements were in sync, but emotionally, we were worlds apart. The song, intended as a celebration of our union, felt more like a cruel joke. When the music faded, Peter's attempt at reassurance only emphasized the void between us. "So, Mrs. Sharon, ready for forever?" he asked. The irony of his question weighed heavily on me. I wanted to voice my doubts, to question if all our tomorrows would be shadowed by the unease of today. Instead, I masked my concerns with a tentative affirmation, hoping against hope that the gloom would dissipate, and that this rocky beginning was not a foretaste of what was to come. I was unaware that this day would merely serve as the overture to a challenging period that would test not only the resilience of our marriage, but the essence of my identity. As we celebrated our union, the festive toasts felt hollow, overshadowed by a sense of loss. The journey back to my home, a charming 3-bedroom house that stood as a testament to my hard work and independence, marked the beginning of our shared life. This home was meant to be our haven, the foundation for our future together. Yet, it soon became the backdrop for a series of confrontations that felt more like an invasion than the start of marital bliss. Julie, living a mere quarter of an hour away, took to visiting uninvited with unsettling frequency. Her criticisms were relentless, targeting everything from my culinary skills to the decor of our home. Her complaints were varied but equally cutting, whether lamenting my tasteless cooking or the choice of bathroom tile color. Peter's attempts to intervene were tepid at best, often seeming more performative than protective. Julie's intrusions became a regular ordeal, each visit an opportunity to assert her dominance through thinly veiled insults and critiques. However, the real turning point came one afternoon when she arrived with suitcases in tow, her declaration of intent clear and her sense of entitlement palpable. This was not just another visit. It was an occupation, one that threatened to suffocate the life out of our nascent marriage. "I'm going to be living here now," she announced, breezing past me to place her luggage in my favorite cozy corner by the window, my sanctuary for reading and quiet moments. "This spot will be just perfect for me," Julie proclaimed with a finality that made my heart drop. I turned to Peter, my eyes wide with disbelief, silently begging him to intervene, to preserve the sanctity of our home. This was a decision we should have made together. Seizing a moment, I called Peter aside, my voice shaking. "This is our home. Shouldn't we have talked about this first?" His gaze met mine, void of the warmth and love that had once seemed so abundant. "Mom's getting older, Sharon. It's not right for her to be alone. She needs to be with family," he explained, stressing the word family in a way that made me feel excluded. "So, I'm not family? Is that it?" The words barely left my lips before the tears began to well up, a mix of hurt and frustration. Peter quickly countered, his patience thinning. "You know, that's not what I mean. But I owe her this." "What about us? What about what we owe to each other? We're supposed to be building our life together, not living with your mom," I argued, but it was as if I was speaking to a wall. My concerns, my feelings, seemed inconsequential. And just like that, Julie's move into our home was decided, steamrolling over my wishes. With Julie's arrival, the dynamic of our home shifted drastically. Every corner of the house, once filled with our shared dreams and plans, now felt weighed down by tension and conflict. My once peaceful reading nook was overtaken by her belongings. The kitchen became a stage for her critiques, and Peter, the man I had married, seemed more like an ally to Julie than to me. It dawned on me that I was no longer just fighting to save my marriage or reclaim my space. I was fighting for my very sense of self, my dignity, and my peace. A persistent thought haunted me. How had things come to this point, where my desires, my space, and my voice were secondary to Julie's preferences? The transformation was stark. My beloved nook was now a monument to Julie's intrusion, the kitchen a battleground for her relentless criticism, and my husband had become a stranger, aligning himself with what felt like the opposition. And this was only the beginning. Life, already challenging, became an unbearable nightmare as the atmosphere in our home grew increasingly oppressive, symbolizing the shrinking of my own space and voice. To add to the mounting pressure, a discovery brought everything into sharper focus: the unmistakable presence of 2 blue lines on a pregnancy test, signaling a new life amidst the turmoil. This revelation intensified the situation, making the already dense atmosphere in the house almost suffocating, as I grappled with the realization that the stakes were now even higher. Clutching the pregnancy test, my hands shook with a mixture of anticipation and dread. I had always dreamt that discovering I was pregnant would be one of the happiest moments of my life, a time filled with excitement and celebration. However, standing alone in the bathroom, tears welling up in my eyes as I faced my reflection, I realized this milestone felt more like a heavy burden. When I shared the news with Peter, his reaction was disappointingly tepid. "Well, that's something," he muttered, quickly diverting the conversation to a renovation idea his mother had proposed. It became clear that Julie saw my pregnancy not just as news, but as her new project. She took it upon herself to oversee every aspect of it, from what I ate to where I would give birth, all under the guise of being helpful. Julie's interference quickly escalated into a form of control. She scrutinized everything I ate, casting judgmental glances at even the simplest of meals and questioning my weight management, despite my assurances that my diet was doctor-approved. "Doctors these days have no clue," she'd scoff dismissively, convinced that her dated wisdom surpassed modern medical advice. As the pregnancy progressed, Julie's demands grew more outrageous. She transformed my home into her domain, expecting me to maintain it to her standards, disregarding the fact that I was pregnant and needed rest. "Sharon, why isn't the living room clean yet?" She would demand from her spot in my once peaceful reading nook, now commandeered as her base for endless phone scrolling and TV watching. My protests of fatigue fell on deaf ears, with Julie insisting that pregnancy was no excuse for laziness. Peter's silence throughout these exchanges only added to the strain. His lack of support became painfully obvious, especially during a dinner that erupted into an argument over baby names. Julie's harsh criticism of my chosen name was the last straw. "Enough, Julie. This is my child, and I will decide how to raise them," I countered, my patience exhausted. Her reaction was one of indignation, as if my asserting some control over my own life was a personal affront. Peter's attempt at peacemaking, siding with his mother and labeling me as emotional, only deepened the chasm between us. I was left feeling more isolated than ever, trapped in a home that had become a battleground, where my voice seemed to matter less and less. This wasn't just about choosing a baby name anymore. It was about reclaiming my autonomy, my dignity, and the sense of belonging that had been systematically eroded by Julie's overbearing presence. Gazing into the reflection of my once shiny wedding ring, I hardly recognized the woman looking back at me. A woman who was gradually losing everything she held dear: her sanctuary, her self-respect, and most heartbreakingly, her determination to stand up for herself. It was during one of our tense confrontations that Julie, brimming with a vindictive sense of victory, delivered a blow that would alter everything. She coldly suggested that perhaps I didn't belong in their family if I couldn't navigate a simple family disagreement. Peter's response, or lack thereof, was perhaps the most painful part. His silence was louder and more hurtful than any words could ever be, making it painfully clear that my ordeal was not just beginning, it had been my reality for far too long. My days turned into a blur, moving through a house that no longer felt like mine, clinging to the only beacon of hope I had left the life growing inside me. Yet even this small comfort felt under siege in the toxic environment I found myself in. The breaking point came one frigid evening during yet another excruciating family dinner. Despite my efforts to prepare a flawless meal, Julie's criticisms were relentless, attacking everything from the food's seasoning to its preparation. Her words felt like physical blows, each comment a strike against my already wavering confidence. But it was her next jab that cut the deepest, questioning my capability as a mother based on my supposed inadequacy in managing household chores. Peter's agreement with her was the final blow, pushing me over the edge. Fueled by a mix of anger, accumulated resentment, and sheer desperation, I found my voice. "Step it up? I've been carrying our child, taking care of our home, and enduring endless criticism from your mother. And you're telling me to step it up?" The shock on their faces said it all, but I was past caring. For too long, I had allowed myself to be diminished and belittled, but in that moment, I reclaimed my voice. "I'm done. I can't do this anymore," I declared, the clarity of my decision piercing through the years of suppression. It was a declaration of my refusal to tolerate any more disrespect or emotional torment. I was ready to fight for myself, for my child, and for a future free from the shadows that had darkened my life. My voice broke as I spoke. I refuse to raise my child in a place where their mother is constantly belittled. If this is what being a family means to you, then I want no part in it. With those final words, I left the dinner table behind, their stunned silence echoing in my wake. Grabbing only the essentials, I made my way to the door, my hands trembling as I reached for the knob, eager to escape the suffocating atmosphere. Julie, ever the antagonist, chose that moment for her most cutting remark yet. "And where do you think you're going? This is Peter's house, not yours." I stopped and faced her, my resolve hardening. "Actually, Julie, this house is mine. I bought it. I decide who stays and who goes." Peter's voice broke through, tinged with desperation. "Sharon, please, let's discuss this." But I was beyond negotiation. "There's nothing left to discuss," I replied, my tears a testament to the pain of my decision. Stepping out into the cold night felt like stepping into a new chapter of my life, one filled with uncertainty, but also a sense of liberation. The door closing behind me signified the end of a tumultuous saga, a final farewell to a life I could no longer bear. I walked away, each step a mixture of pain and determination, propelled by the need to reclaim my autonomy. The journey to my parents' home was a blur of cold, fatigue, and heartache. Just a short distance from my haven, a misstep caused me to stumble and fall, the physical pain a mere echo of my inner turmoil. Yet this fall did not deter me. It only strengthened my resolve. Reaching my parents' doorstep, the concern in their eyes mirrored the gravity of my situation. As they ushered me to the hospital, I realized that this moment of vulnerability marked not just an end, but a beginning. Lying in the hospital bed with the reality of my circumstances setting in, I understood that returning to my previous life was not an option. This breaking point was a crucial step towards reclaiming the life and dignity that had been eroded away, a painful yet essential transition towards healing and independence. The clarity that comes with such moments is profound, revealing the path forward, away from the shadows of the past towards a future of my own making. Caught in a whirlwind of emotions, I stood surrounded by the comforting yet worried presence of my parents. Their concern was palpable, a silent testament to their fears about the true state of my marriage, now unmistakably revealed in its troubled depth. Breaking the heavy silence, my mom voiced her concern, her words heavy with the weight of the unfolding reality. "Sharon, love, what's your plan now?" "Unsure but resolute," I replied. "I'm not sure, Mom. But one thing's clear, I can't return to that life. Not now, not ever." My declaration, more confident than I anticipated, seemed to echo my newfound determination. My father, who'd been pacing anxiously, paused to reassure me, emphasizing that their support was unwavering regardless of my choice. He reminded me to consider not just my own future, but that of the life growing inside me. His words prompted a silent acknowledgement from me. My mind had been a battlefield of scenarios, each uncertain yet laced with the possibility of a fresh start. The unexpected buzz of my phone broke through my thoughts, a message from Peter, a plea for communication. But to me, his timing was a door long closed. His words, unseen, were left in the void as I turned off my phone, a symbolic end to our dialogue. My next steps were clear, marked by action rather than words. Reaching out to a family lawyer was my first decisive act towards ending the turmoil of my marriage. Supported by my parents, we navigated the cold legal breakdown of our union, discussing divorce, custody, and financial support. Despite the sterile nature of these discussions, they empowered me, marking the first steps of taking control over my destiny and ensuring the well-being of my unborn child. Within a week, Peter and Julie received the formal notices, divorce papers for Peter and an eviction notice for Julie from the home that was legally mine. Included were demands for substantial child support and compensation for the emotional turmoil I had endured. Though drastic, these actions were necessary, severing the ties that had long bound me to a life of despair. When I finally re-engaged with my phone, it was flooded with Peter's attempts to reach out. His messages conveyed a mix of regret and a desire for reconciliation, but the scars left by nights of humiliation, years of neglect, and Julie's calculated malice, all silently condoned by Peter, were too deep. The brief temptation to hear him out was quickly overshadowed by the memory of the pain endured. This moment wasn't just about ending a chapter. It was about reclaiming my story, one where the shadows of the past no longer dictated the brightness of my future. The love I once felt for him had been completely overshadowed by the sorrow of our failed marriage. I took decisive steps to move on, deleting messages, removing his contact information, and blocking him across all social media. To me, Peter had become just a part of my history, a distressing chapter I was more than ready to conclude. Despite knowing the road ahead would be fraught with its own obstacles, divorce is complicated. Even more so with a child on the way, I was finally navigating my own life's direction, stepping out from the shadow that had enveloped me towards a future filled with hope. The day of the court proceedings, the room was filled with that distinct, sterile chill characteristic of spaces where fates are decided. My lawyer sat beside me, her posture exuding assurance, while my parents offered silent, steady support from behind. Across the aisle, Peter appeared lost, the reality of the situation dawning on him, while Julie's expression was one of shock and defiance. As the session began, the judge walked in, prompting everyone to rise. The process that followed was a flurry of legal jargon, with accusations and evidence laid bare. It was as if Julie and Peter were seeing their actions for the first time, not just through the legal lens, but mine as well. When it came to Julie's turn to speak, her usual confidence was absent. She attempted to justify her actions as concern for her son's welfare, but her explanation fell flat, especially under the judge's skeptical gaze. Judge Nina R. Morrison's verdict was clear and firm. I was granted a full divorce and sole custody of our unborn child. Peter was ordered to provide child support, and Julie, faced with a hefty fine for her emotional abuse and harassment, was visibly shaken. As the judge's gavel fell, a sense of liberation washed over me, though it was not without a tinge of sadness. My marriage had concluded not with dramatic confrontations, but through the quiet shuffling of papers and the firm voice of justice. This chapter of my life was closed, paving the way for a new beginning, free from the chains of the past. Gaining my freedom came at a price I'd never envisioned on the day I pledged my vows. As we exited the courtroom, Peter approached with a bewildered look, expressing his sorrow and disbelief at how our lives had unraveled. Looking into his eyes, I no longer saw my future, but rather a profound emptiness where love once resided. I never imagined this would be our end, Peter. But apologies can't undo what's been done, I told him, decisively turning away to leave the past behind. Julie sought my gaze, possibly hoping for a sign of forgiveness or recognition, but I couldn't afford her that closure. She had taken too much from me, and I refused to let her see how deeply she had affected my life. Stepping outside, the world seemed to embrace me anew, with the sun shining brighter and colors more vivid. It felt like I was viewing life with a fresh perspective, one not dimmed by the shadows of turmoil. My mother's embrace and words of pride brought tears to my eyes. "You're truly free now, Sharon," she said, her emotion evident. "I couldn't have faced this without you and Dad," I responded, feeling an immense gratitude for their unwavering support. That evening, in the solitude of my home now solely mine, I felt a deep tranquility. Alone, yet far from lonely, for the first time in a long stretch, I was free to live by my own standards. The path ahead as a single mother seemed daunting, yet as I felt my unborn child's subtle movements, confidence washed over me. We would manage, I was sure of it. The ordeal I had endured led me to this moment of self-discovery. While it left scars, they marked a tale of resilience, not defeat. Facing the future, I was not just compelled by circumstance, but driven by choice. This distinction filled me with a profound sense of empowerment. Ready for what lay ahead, not out of necessity, but from a place of deliberate decision, I knew this was the start of a meaningful new chapter.